Same way with schools. In fact, this would be a perfect transition to bring in Patrick Fitzpatrick, headmaster at Plumstead Christian Academy, who was the host last night for the 3rd Annual Founders Forum event, which was fantastic. Mr. Fitzpatrick, welcome in, sir. Pat, you there?
I am here.
Hi, how are you today?
I'm doing well, thank you.
Hey, listen, I wanted to bring you in on this for a second, totally unrelated to what I was just talking about. But, you know, the great debate is your Plumstead Christian Academy, I think, is tremendous. And, in fact, my wife and I have come away from this event now twice saying to ourselves, if we lived closer, we'd think strongly about sending our kids there. We're so impressed with your school and the testimony folks have been sharing there at these forums. But, you know, one of the things that's the great national debate, right, is the ability for parents like me and all over the Delaware Valley to send their kids to the school of their choice and perhaps being given the advantage through taxes, credits, if you will, whatever word you want to use, to maybe put it toward your school. That's something politically that I think a lot of people could get behind as parents, don't you?
I absolutely agree. And I think that that kind of competition would breed a little more excellence in all of the schools.
Yeah. And so when you hear people say we'd like to give parents tax credits to take their kids out of the public school, wherever they find themselves, and send them to, say, Plumstead, that just simply means allowing parents to keep more of their own disposable income to pay your school privately to educate their children. That's all that means to me.
Absolutely.
This is, again, the 3rd Annual Founders Forum. You hosted Tim Tebow last night, and another sold-out event. You've done a great job bringing in, I mean, it was George W. Bush last year. I think Palin kicked it off the first go-around, right?
Absolutely.
How do you get these people? I mean, frankly, when you travel out to the Souderton area, it's pretty rural. Tebow was even commenting on it. And you think to yourself, how in the world does Pat Fitzpatrick get these guys out here?
Yeah, it's funny when we announced, especially George W. Bush's arrival, one of our parents on Facebook said, someone has connections.
Yeah, but, who is it, huh? Who?
Yeah, the reality is that we just asked. We reached out to Tim's agent just like we reached out to the Washington Speakers Bureau, who represent Sarah Palin and George W. Bush, and we were willing to pay what they were asking, which I think speaks, first of all, to them, but we were also, I think, the kind of venue that they like. You know, we represent a lot of what all of them hold dear in values.
Tebow last night was wildly entertaining, and you could choose any number of things to talk about, but one of the first things he talked about, and I really appreciated, was the idea that Christians can be competitive. It's about the humility in victory, or defeat, I suppose, either way, being a good sport and being humble about it. But the notion, my wife and I were talking about this, the notion somehow that, Christians have got to lay down and be passive and can't compete and get out there and grind it out with the best of them is a misnomer.
I agree. In fact, the Apostle Paul says, run the race in a way that will earn you the prize. It's a common Christian theme to try to win, but too many people equate that kind of competitive spirit with poor sportsmanship as well, and the two don't need to go hand in hand.
Hey, something like this bombing or explosion, whatever you want to choose to call it, terrorist attack in Boston yesterday, how do you talk about this with your kids? Because I know in a public school setting where my kids currently attend, much like Newtown, there was this jittery sort of, well, we're not really going to speak about it unless the kids ask, and then there's emails sent out, and everybody's going to be very cautious about each other's feelings. I wonder, in a Christian environment like Plumstead, is it dealt with differently?
It is dealt with differently. I mean, we have the freedom to interject faith and biblical thought very overtly into what we say. And so I would say, one of my favorite verses from the Psalms would come into play as I speak to the children. The same God who named the stars and put them in place. So this God who is awesome, big, and creative is the same God who heals the brokenhearted. So he cares about us. He knows when the sparrow falls in the field. So he certainly is saddened over things like this and can provide the comfort. And so that would be one of the messages, that he can give peace. Do bad things happen? Absolutely. Read through the narrative of Scripture.
Right.
Bad things happen to good people throughout. But in the end, we have to believe that, God is working in a way. Sometimes we don't see this for many years and even many generations, but God is working in a way to bring people to him.
Plumstead Christian School's headmaster is Patrick Fitzpatrick. He's on the line, and I love last night. You say it every year. Yes, that's really my name. But You talked with Tebow last night. His book, he talks about the eye black and writing the scripture on it. And what was stunning to me, and that was actually the punchline of one of his stories, stunning to him, you do the math on it between his time, writing Philippians 4:13 on his eye black to when he started writing John 3:16 in the NFL. Something like 180 million searches of that scripture online just by him passively writing that on his eye black. That just blew my mind, and to his point, he couldn't believe 90 million people were out there researching John 3:16.
Right. And I, being a fan of football, especially when I was much younger, when my father was alive, we would watch U of M, especially. Sorry to my Pennsylvania peeps, but I grew up in Michigan, and then, professional football. It seemed like there was always someone in the stands holding up a sign, John 3:16.
Right.
It's a pretty common thing, and it does speak to one of the things that we really work hard on at Plumstead Christian School, which is biblical literacy. We want our kids to graduate from Plumstead really understanding what the Bible is about. And I can tell you that when I watch Jeopardy, for example, and it, inevitably once every 2, 3, 4 weeks we have this category on the Bible, I'm like, oh, good, because I know that I'm going to be able to answer those questions, even though the brainiacs that are up there usually really don't do so well.
You do this Founders Forum every year, and you've been gracious enough every year to include us and give us some access to it so that we can give it to our listeners. I was sitting next to the winner yesterday, Steve, and his daughter. She was 14, and boy, there were a number of ladies in the house rather smitten with Mr. Tebow, were there not?
Oh, absolutely.
He's the catch. He's the prize.
And, I read his book in the last couple weeks, and one of the things that he says in the book is that his parents and siblings think he is the pickiest person when it comes to relationships and girls, and it goes on in that little section in the book to say that it's just that his mother and his sisters had such high character that they set the bar so high for him. And one of the questions I wanted to ask him, but we kind of nixed it there, was tell me about that character that you're drawn to, that you're attracted to. And I wish in the end that he had responded to that, because I know there are a lot of girls out there, I think, that would have benefited from hearing about the character that men like Tim are drawn to.
Pat, the thing about him and the circles professional athletes run in, as you know, that guy could get, my wife and I were talking about this too, he could get in all kinds of trouble if he was out looking for it. I mean, these guys travel city to city, and they get out there in sort of a jocular fashion and hang out to different places. And I mean, it's not hard for a guy like that to get into trouble, or frankly just, mess around and kind of misbehave generally. And that's got to take a tremendous discipline unto itself, because you've got to figure, I mean, he's a good-looking guy. He's a quarterback, for Pete's sakes. I'm sure he has ample opportunity to get into trouble if he wanted to.
Oh, I bet. And I think women probably all over the place will throw themselves on him. So it takes a conviction, personal conviction, and really a realization that even when he's alone, he's not alone, because God's with him. Well,
it was really an inspirational night, and he's a kid, really, when you think about it. I mean, he was talking about, being 19 when he got the Heisman, and that was, 08, was it, or something like that?
Yeah, I think he's 25, so... very young. Yeah,
and he said at the end of the day, he hopes when it's all said and done, the Heisman's going to rot, go away. People will forget his name. He's really not interested in being known as Tim Tebow, football player, when it's all said and done. I thought that was important, too.
Yeah, at the dinner, he said he wants to live a life of significance.
Yeah.
And that football is a platform for achieving that, not the end-all. And I think... boy, he is mature beyond his years.
Well, and to not even be a starter and potentially be cut as it is, I mean, to be sort of a homeless football player and probably still one of the most talked about, it says something, and I would argue it, some of it has to do with his play, maybe at the college level, but I don't think Tim Tebow is famous for being Tim Tebow because of football necessarily, do you?
Well, I mean, I think it's a combo. He was arguably the best college quarterback ever.
Yes.
But I agree with you. I mean, he played so little this year, and yet his fame and, the attractiveness that he has to others has not faded at all.
It's fascinating. I hope we can be helpful next year in letting folks know when you finally land that next guest, because it's always such a tremendous event out there. So thanks for including us.
Thank you. I'm glad you came.
Best to you, too. And the Plumstead Christian School folks, a fantastic organization.